Regeneration. One of the best concepts ever in sci-fi, and it's the reason that Doctor Who has lasted for 60 years almost. Obviously back in the 1960s, William Hartnell's health was deteriorating, so he couldn't keep on playing the role. So what do? Do they just cancel Doctor Who? Do they get a new actor but make him look like Hartnell, so acting like nothing's changed? Or do they use their noggin and create an idea that allows them to change the actor and weave it into their narrative? That's the option they chose, as they cast Patrick Troughton in the 1960s, and ever since then, multiple actors have played the Doctor, and it's what's allowed the show to keep on going, and it's always fresh and new and exciting when a Doctor regenerates. So today, I, Classic of the Geek, will be ranking every Doctor Who regeneration scene from worst to best. Few things though before we get started. One, this is just the regeneration scene, so not the whole episode, just the scene where the Doctor regenerates. Two, it's not going to be the Master or River, just the Doctor's regeneration. So, you know, there have been the Master, the River, the General, all, you know, just the Doctor. And third, I'm not going to include the Stolen Earth regeneration because it is just David Tennant turning back into himself, so I can't really compare it amongst all the others. So, with that out of the way, let's get to it. In last place, we have Colin Baker to Sylvester McCoy in Time and the Rani. Or, more accurately, Sylvester McCoy in a wig to Sylvester McCoy in Time and the Rani. Because that's literally what happened. Back in the day, Colin Baker got fired, and understandably so, he didn't want to come back for the regeneration after how badly the BBC treated him in the 80s. And I'm totally on board with Colin with that decision. But what we got was Sylvester McCoy, who's notably shorter than Colin, in his outfit and a wig that they presumably got from Poundland or something, just trying to pass it off as if Colin is still there. And it's like what I said at the beginning, like, oh, why didn't they, oh, they could have just recast somebody and passed him off as if it was still Hartnell. That's exactly what they did here. And as well as that, the way it's staged, it just makes it look like the Doctor fell off his exercise bike and banged his head on the console. Like, that's just a rubbish way to go. Like, that's awful, no matter which way you look at it. I do really like the swirly effect on the regeneration, you know, the face, but that's about it. Like, this is really poorly made, a really naff way to go, and it kind of feels like it's in bad taste. It just feels like they're trying to get rid of the old guy in quite a not very nice way. And knowing the context, like behind the scenes, it's not a very nice scene to watch. At 12th place is Sylvester McCoy to Paul McGann in the TV movie. First of all, the way that the 7th Doctor gets killed off, it's really underwhelming. You just get shot. Like, it's a bit of a whimper way to go for someone like Sylvester McCoy. I mean, yeah, it could have been a lot better. And the way they make it more horror-based in, like, the comparison to Frankenstein's monster and the lightning, like, what's that all about? I don't know, it doesn't ring true to what regeneration should be. It feels more scary and like horror. I don't know, it doesn't really work as well. If there's one thing I'd give this above Colin's, is that Sylvester McCoy is actually there for the regeneration, so, you know, there is actually a concrete end to the 7th Doctor, and yeah, that's a lot better than what Colin's regeneration got, but still, it didn't feel like the writers were investing a lot into this regeneration. They sort of just wanted to get the 7th Doctor out of the equation and focus on the 8th, which I get, but it still makes for a pretty weak regeneration. At number 11 is John Hurt into Christopher Eccleston in The Day of the Doctor. Now, this is a bit like Colin's regeneration, where, you know, one of the actors isn't present. Eccleston isn't there because he didn't want to be in the 50th anniversary. But here, it's a bit better because it doesn't feel as in bad taste as much. Like, it doesn't feel like they're trying to get rid of it. It feels like they're more trying to just fill a gap, and it brings a new series full circle, and it has better intentions. You know, it's not an amazing regeneration, and yeah, it's not amazing. It's not the most spectacular. It's not even the most necessary, to be fair. But it's an okay one. It's not too bad, I don't think. Come at me, Tennant fans. Number 10 is the 10th Doctor's regeneration in The End of Time Part 2. Now, I really can't put it below any of the others, because, you know, is a proper regeneration story. It's not there to fill a gap necessarily, but I still don't really like this one. It just feels too vain and overly dramatic and overly emotional. Obviously this was a big change, you know, because Tennant was leaving, Russell T Davies was leaving, but it doesn't, this story, and especially this scene, it doesn't feel like it's embracing the oncoming change of Matt Smith and Moffat, but it's almost dreading it. It's like, this is the end, and it's like, it's just, no, that's not what regeneration's about. And the I don't want to go, I can't stand. I'm sorry, I just can't. It just sums up all of my thoughts. It's like, it's too self-absorbed, it's too vain, it's too overly emotional, it sort of sabotages Moffat and Matt Smith. It just doesn't work for me. However, I've got to say, Valet de Chem is a great piece of music, which is the music that plays throughout. And also, the effects are great, but it's New Who, so the effects are always great, aren't they? At number 9 is Jon Pertwee to Tom Baker in Planet of the Spiders. Now, this one, it never really jumps out to me. Like, it's not a terrible regeneration, but yeah, it just never stands out for me. Like, there's no music in it, so I don't particularly remember that aspect of it. The effect is very generic. It's just a generic fade effect that I could do myself. And, you know, Sarah Jane and the Brigadier, their reactions are really good, and Pertwee's last line, you know, tear Sarah Jane while there's life. You know, that's quite cool, and it's a nice callback to a previous Pertwee story. But it just never usually just, I don't know, it just doesn't stand out for me. At number 8, we have Paul McGann to John Hurt in the mini-episode Night of the Doctor. Now, this one was really good. It was great seeing Paul McGann back after God knows how many years since the TV movie. And it really nicely set up the 50th anniversary special with the War Doctor. And it gave this Doctor quite a tragic ending, you know. He couldn't be the Doctor anymore. He had to become this warrior. And, yeah, it was quite a brutal end to his Doctor. Now, obviously, it was quite brief. That's why it's a bit low down on the list. But don't think it's not a bad one, because it is a really good regeneration. I just can't put it above the others, because it's great, but I just prefer the other ones. I so wish I could have put this one higher, but at number 7 is Eccleston into Tennant from Parting and the Ways. Now, I think the reason I've got it this low down is because it's not the most original regeneration. You know, it is the Doctor absorbing the energy from the time vortex, like the 3rd Doctor did, to save his companion, like what the 5th Doctor did. But those are nitpicks, and, you know, I love this regeneration, from the music to Eccleston's performance, to the dialogue, the way he's comforting Rose and, in essence, the audience. This is the first regeneration of the new series, so it had to get it right first time, and it did. The glowy effect is great. It's the first time that's used, and it's great. As I say, it's a fantastic regeneration, and I wish I could have put this higher, but those nitpicks do bring it down a bit. But remember, we are in the top half of this list, so, you know, it is great. In 6th place, we have the original regeneration, William Hartnell to Patrick Troughton in The 10th Planet. Now, the main reason it's here is because it's the first one. If it was not for this incredible moment in just pop culture history, you know, in the history of, like, movies and TV shows, if it wasn't for this moment, Doctor Who would not have continued. So for that, I will always respect and love it. Fortunately, it is still existing because The 10th Planet is a partly missing story. Thankfully, the scene does survive, and the fade effect, you know, when Hartnell's face and then it, you know, like glows into Troughton, the transition seems like seamless. Next up, we have Patrick Troughton to Jon Pertwee in The War Games. Now, this scene when I was younger used to creep me out. I think it's the music is really ominous, the black and white aesthetic, Troughton's swirly face, the Time Lord's bellowing voice, you know, the time has come for you to change your appearance, Doctor. It used to creep me out when I was younger. Now, I know I complain about the 7th Doctor one being too horror-based, but the thing is, this isn't really necessarily like horror-based, and it's not trying too hard to be like that. It's more eerie, and I think some of that is on accident, like, you know, like the black and white, or the empty void that this scene ends on. I think, you know, not necessarily intentional, but it is kind of creepy and a bit eerie. Also, when you think about it, the Doctor's death in this is pretty morbid. Like, he gets executed by his own people after being put on trial, that's really dark and brutal. And the whole swirling face for Troughton, I don't know, I really like it. And you know what? I don't mind the fact that there isn't a transition. It just makes it really mysterious. It adds to the Time Lord's mystique. And it's just really ominous. And I really like it. At number 4, we have Tom Baker, the 4th Doctor, into Peter Davison from Legopolis. Now, I do have a lot of nostalgia for Legopolis. It was one of the first classic stories I remember watching, and I remember this scene. It's always stuck with me. I love the way that you see all the different monsters and villains and like all the past companions like in flashes. Tom's final line, "It's the end but the moment has been prepared for," is a beautiful final line. The music is fantastic. It's one of my favourite bits of music from the classic era. And the idea of the Watcher is really cool, and the way it sort of transitions into Davison, really good. I think the main issue with this regeneration, and it was pointed out in another video that I watched recently, is the way that the companions are crouching by him. It looks like a play. It looks like a stage production. But other than that, this is a beautiful regeneration. At number 3, we have Peter Capaldi into Jodie Whittaker from Twice Upon a Time. Now, this was the first, and at this point, only regeneration I watched on broadcast. And look, it was my it was the first generation, and your first generation will always stick with you because it was your first Doctor going. And, even though I was hopeful for the Chris Chibnall era, even though I was optimistic, it was still a shame to see Peter go. And even more so now, I really would love Peter back because, it was brilliant. But putting that on aside, this scene is great. It's the best looking regeneration. The direction, the colours, the way it's shot, it's gorgeous. The music, it's the music from Heaven Sent, Shepherd's Boy, it's great. Capaldi's speech, the dialogue can be a bit clunky in parts, when he's on about pairs and children, but he makes it magical. And, the stuff with, never be cruel or cowardly, laugh hard, run fast, be kind, one more lifetime won't kill anyone. Great lines there. And because it was my first, I will always have a soft spot for it. At number 2, we have Peter Davison into Colin Baker from The Caves of Androzani, one of the best stories of all time. Now, this is probably the most heroic that the Doctor's ever been. He's saving Peri, a woman he's only known for one story, out of this dismal situation. There is no happy ending here. It's just, you have to go and you've been poisoned. And, there's no happy ending here. And the way that the Doctor doesn't know if he will regenerate, the fact that he doubts, maybe this is death, this is it. And, the companions try and egg him on to regenerate, but then the Master is like, "No, Doctor, you must die." It's that conflict, and then there's the really weird effect. And it's just a really great one. And then Colin Baker appears, and it's just a great regeneration. But at number 1 is Matt Smith into Peter Capaldi from Time of the Doctor. Now, this is the only regeneration that has ever made me tear up. I genuinely do. And in the context of the story, because the Doctor was an old man for a bit, I don't know, because that cracks me up as well. And, well, not cracks me up, it tears me up, sorry. And this does as well. And it is my favourite Doctor leaving, so, yeah. The speech is brilliantly written by Moffat. The music, great choice, it's the Rings of Akaten music. The Amy cameo is really good as well. And Clara's reaction feels genuinely natural. And when Capaldi shows up, it's hilarious as well. It's so shocking. And the CGI effect with the, the sneeze generation, I don't mind it because we had the Doctor, with all the regeneration energy blowing up the Daleks earlier. We don't need another big one, But what I love so much about this is Matt Smith's performance. Every single thing about it, from his delivery of the lines, to his body language, to his facial expressions, even to the little hand gestures that he gives. And, oh my God, he just does it to perfection.